Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. In this game we're going to cover a closed Sicilian with white, and we're going to see what happens when we face the familiar or the best response from black in this position after we play bishop to b5. We're going to see what happens when black plays this move, knight to d4, and we follow up with knight f3. So let's go ahead and hop in here. This is a fun little game that I played earlier today. So it starts off with e4 and c5. I'm going to turn down the volume on that guy just a little bit. There we go. Sorry about that. And then we're playing the closed Sicilian with knight to c3. Black is going to be slightly less prepared for this, and we can master this system faster than he can. And then we're going to see the move knight c6. Knight c6 is by far the most common move that I face when I play the closed Sicilian, and our best move here is bishop to b5, threatening to take the knight. And if black doesn't do something about it, if black doesn't play queen to c7 or queen to b6, threatening to take back with the queen, then let's say he just plays g6, he wants to play a dragon setup. When we take this knight, then black is going to end up with doubled pawns, either from b takes or d takes. So black's best move in this position, as you've probably seen if you played the closed Sicilian, is knight to d4. And in this situation, our best move is actually knight to f3. Knight can take back, and then we take back with our knight, and we're still ahead in development. And then if the knight takes here, we can take here with the queen on f3, and we're still ahead, and we're hugely ahead in development. So of course black's not going to do that. Black's going to take with the knight, and then we take with the knight. And this is absolutely how this continuation is supposed to be played. Now, black's two best moves in this situation are either d6 or d5, and my opponent opts for d5 in this setup here. And so in this case, we're simply going to take here, and at this point, my opponent decides to play a6 rather than recapturing with the queen immediately. Recapturing with the queen immediately allows us to play knight to c3 and get into some other tricks. And even better than knight c3, if our opponent was to take on d5, it would be losing on the spot to knight c7. That would be game over. It would be check on the king and also taking the queen for absolute free. So black cannot take our pawn on d5 there. So he's forced to try to kick away the knight to a6. Well, okay, we'll just play out here to c3. And at this point, knight to f6. So now black has double pressure on this pawn. And we have no way that we can defend this pawn, but that's okay because we're up a pawn right now. And so I opt for the move. There's two primary moves in this situation. One is to castle, and one is to play d4. I decide to play d4 here first. And after taking the pawn with the knight, I decide to unleash this double attack on the knight with the queen, with the idea that since that knight is only defended by one piece, the queen, my opponent has to respond, and he is most likely going to respond by taking my knight on c3, at which point I can take, ruining my opponent's castle, and then recapture the knight. Now, we have a couple of things to consider here in this position. Number one, we have tripled pawns, and tripled pawns in chess are usually best avoided. But on the flip side of that, what we get in return is that black's king can no longer castle, and it's out in the center of the board. Remember, almost everything in chess is give and take. You are giving something to your opponent, but you're taking something back. It's a game of exchanges and trades and sort of negotiations, if you could think about it this way. And so one of the things, going all the way back to when I decide to take the pawn on c5 and go up a pawn again, I'm already acknowledging, I'm willing to accept as a trade the fact that I'm going to end up with tripled pawns. He's going to end up with a king that can't castle, and I'm going to be temporarily up a pawn. And so what I love about this position is what we learn from this position. I actually just covered in another video on the advanced Caro-Kann, which you guys can check out. And the role that our pawn on c5 plays against the b5 pawn push. Of course, like what black would love, we always know that bishops are most powerful on their long diagonals where they can exert the most control on the board, right? So as chess players, we know that. And so what black would love to be able to do in a situation like this is to play a move like b5 and then be able to put his light squared bishop on b7 and take control of the most powerful diagonal that a light squared bishop can be on, which is this diagonal right here. And one of the beauties of the c5 pawn location for white, even though it is an ugly triple pawn for now, the b5 pawn push can now be taken en passant by us. And so what we are anticipating happening here is we have to anticipate that black is probably going to try to push this pawn, opening up an attack and bringing some. Now, my opponent opts not to do that. My opponent opts to play bishop to f5. So there's two good moves in this situation. And what I want you to do is go ahead and pause your video. There's three good moves. I want you to pause your video and try to figure out where you would put your knight in this situation. Drinking some Jefferson's Ocean Voyage whiskey today. So there's a couple places to think about putting the knight. One is to move the knight to d4, which would defend our c2 pawn, and also put pressure on this bishop. Now, what I don't like about that move is once we put pressure on the bishop can escape to a square, g6, where our knight on d4 can no longer affect it, no longer influence it. And also what I don't like about that move is it's going to block something important that I want my dark squared bishop to do. So I decide instead to play the knight to e5 here. One of the reasons I decide to do this is because the knight is eyeing the f7 pawn. And if my knight takes the f7 pawn, then I will be forking the king and the rook, and that'll be game over. So essentially, black is sort of forced to play this bishop to g6 move. He could have played the bishop over here, but then that blocks in his dark squared bishop because he can never play e6 at that point. Now, on an open board, because it's generally favorable in an open board situation where you have all these open squares, it's generally considered sort of the holy grail of chess that bishops are more valuable. And on a board like this that has so many open squares, it's typically a really good idea to have the bishop pair like my opponent has. I don't want him to have the bishop pair, so I go ahead and take. Now, I take the bishop pair away from him, but I give him an open file for his rook. See, it's give and take, and that's okay. Now, I'm anticipating now either e6 or e5 opening up the bishop's attack on our pawn, and so I play bishop to e3 in this situation. And we're going to get rook to c8, so now if he plays e6, he'll have two pieces going up against it, and there's no way in two moves, well, in one move, he will be attacking that pawn with two pieces. There's no way in one move that I can defend that pawn with two of my pieces. So in a situation like this, what's really helpful is to identify weaknesses in your opponent's camp, undefended pieces. These three pieces of black's are undefended. It would be really useful in a situation like this, since I only have one move before he's going to be double attacking our pawn, since I only have one move until he's double attacking and I can't get one, it would be really useful if I played a move that would enable me to attack one of his undefended pieces. So what black should absolutely play in this situation is just rook to c7. And my opponent makes a mistake here and he plays king to c7, cutting off the rook from the pawn. This is not advisable in this situation. And at this point, I don't have to castle, but I go ahead and castle because I know at some point I'm going to want both of my rooks in the game. And so my opponent plays rook back over to b8, and I miss an opportunity to play bishop to f4, just forking the king and the rook here, and this would be game over. We go on for a little bit longer, about another 5-6 moves or so. This would have been game over in this situation. I eventually do get the rook fork. First I play rook to b6, jamming the pawn so he can't push it. After he opens, we can get the rook over here, creating a mating net. So if at any point I can get a check on the king, he only has one square that he can go to. Brings the bishop out, and I play this hoping that after he takes here, I'll take here, and then I get my fork. and then we have game over. So I eventually end up getting the fork. And what's really interesting about this position here, if you go back to this specific point right here, where I could have played bishop to f4, this game is still basically over. If I play bishop to f4, check, it's over right away. And if I take the course of action that I took, there's really not much that black can do. So just wanted you guys to get familiar with one of black's, so this is absolutely black's best move right here. This is what you should see the most often. But a lot of times you aren't, you're getting that a6 pawn push, and then we know, we've covered it in other videos, when you get the a6 pawn push in this position, you simply take the knight, forcing black to stack his pawns, and then you'll have to go watch my other videos to see what move is best in this situation that completely jams up black's position and cramps him for the rest of the game. But in this game, we get black's optimal response, and our optimal response is white, should be knight f3 here. And after takes, what we're seeing here with this d5 pawn push is we're seeing one of black's top two responses in this move and how we can handle it. We're going to go ahead and take that pawn, kicks our knight, there's only one place to put it, and then we're playing this d4 here. This is a system, or an idea, I should say, that I borrowed from my time playing the Scandinavian defense. So I have an entire video, it's one of my most watched videos on my channel actually, of what happens and what we can do in the Scandinavian defense when instead of taking the pawn here on d5, black decides to play this move knight to f6. And after something like knight to f3 and queen takes, we're playing this d4 move. If we don't play knight f3 first, in this situation, d4 is still an extremely acceptable move across the board. This idea of the stack pawn, knowing that this first pawn here is going to perish, it's not going to be on our side anymore. This idea of playing the d4 pawn right in front of it, not necessarily trying to hold on to it. So hope you guys really enjoyed this video, got a lot out of it, feel more confident about what to do when you play against the Nc6 variation in your closed Sicilian, and just how powerful our pawn on c5 can be after we play our bishop over to e3, and it's preventing this b5 pawn push because of possible en passant implications. So if you found this video useful, go ahead and hit the like and subscribe button, and we'll catch you guys on the next one.